At a time when the world is facing its perhaps biggest global financial crisis, at a time when G20 of the world's biggest countries are getting together to solve that crisis, we are lucky to have with us Mr. Nayan Chanda, a former journalist and the author of what I think is probably the best book on globalization called Bound Together. He is from Yale. Mr. Chanda, my first question would be, given that we are now in the middle of this crisis, which seems at this moment to be somewhat moderating, although not ending, and where you have 20 countries getting together to fix it. How does this crisis stand in the entire 50,000 years of history that you have studied on globalization?
Well, the 50,000 years of history has only very few hundred years of last century, which actually saw the economic integration taking place. So it is very new phenomenon. One of the earliest crises one knows is the tulip mania in Holland, where there's a big speculation on the value of tulip bulb. But that was a domestic, almost a European at maximum issue, which led to a loss of a lot of people's wealth. But more recent one was the 1997 crisis, an Asian crisis, which led to collapse of two governments, led to collapse of many companies, and unemployment of millions of workers. But this one is perhaps the most globalized crisis, in the sense that what started in Wall Street has now spread to the whole world, and that's the reason why 20 countries of the major countries of the world have been brought together for the first time in history to actually try to find a solution to this crisis.
All through, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh also said recently that this crisis is the beginning of a balance of power to emerging countries like India, China, and Brazil. Now, I don't want to be so specific, but in the entire canvas that you have studied, have such events happened earlier, where a major problem brought worlds together, a new order was created?
Yes, I think that's one of the first thing was the Treaty of Westphalia in 1648 in Europe. The rise of national states, they had to find a way of preserving peace. So these national states of Europe came together to accept the notion that the state sovereignty should be respected, and you cannot just go into somebody else's country and change the government or stuff like that. And in fact, interestingly, in 1880s, the first global conference was held in Washington, and that conference was to determine the time zone of the world. The world was, at that time, they had railway lines and telegraph, and they moved fast, but the people did not know what time was in any part of the world. And so some 27 countries gathered in Washington to determine that the earth should be divided into 24-hour zone. So that was the first global governance issue that was raised.
The people who have created this crisis, or who are being blamed for this crisis, are mere puppets, in my opinion, of technology and innovation. The adventurers, so to speak, the people who drive countries forward, who take civilizations forward. But in this particular case, when I observe them carefully, these people can be classified as traders because they are there to make a profit. They can be classified as preachers because they are preaching things like democracy, globalization, finance. They are adventurers when they devise new products which nobody can understand, perhaps not even themselves and their lawyers. And they are also warriors trying to take over one another, expand their kingdoms. And do you see in this crisis a narrowing down of all these four categories into one unit called, let's say, the deviant speculator?
Well, I think you have a very colorful way of describing the perpetrators of the present crisis. You can look at it that way, but basically the root of it is the desire to make profit. So everything else is secondary. They are not going to preach free market if that free market does not enhance their profit. They are not going to propose democracy if that is not going to help them financially. So the bottom of it is the desire to make profit. And then you have other motivations that come in, including what you said, the warrior spirit of actually poaching into other companies, acquiring merger, going into another country to establish a big operation there. So these are can be called kind of warrior-like activities. But again, at the root of this is the desire to maximize profit.
You wouldn't call these people the Genghis Khan of the 21st century?
No, Genghis Khan has now been, historians are revising his role in history. He is no longer seen as the great destroyer, because the Mongol Empire maintained peace for some half a century, and leading the Silk Road that connected in China to Europe as the safest route to travel for traders. So it was during the Mongol Empire that trade flourished.
I'm still a little confused on this. The fact that this trader wants to make money lies at the root. But how to make money, there is the warrior in him, there is the adventurer in him. You disagree with this thesis?
No, I don't disagree. But in order, the warrior, the definition of warrior is essentially to defeat an enemy, and that enemy often was enemy of another country, another government, that you defeat in order to take physical control of the territory of the people.
But now that all territories are controlled, so the fight now is mental. It's at a level of when you click a button and billions of dollars flow here and there. You don't think that imagery works?
No, it doesn't work, because the warriors are still very much present. You just look at Afghanistan, look at Iraq, look at Indian Navy in the Somalian waters. And so these are warriors, and they are performing a task in terms of preserving peace or acquiring territory.
Okay, I'll shift the topic a bit. One of the reasons for the growth of civilizations and globalization has been transport. Now, so far it has been a very smooth journey until the last 1 year, when oil prices have shot up. And although they are down now, it is not, they may rise again. There is a pressure on oil. How do you see the future of globalization without transport?
This is actually very, very interesting and important question, because history of globalization shows that with each new technology allowing for faster transportation, more volume transportation, has increased the connections and interdependence. So from sail ship to steamship was a big change, and from steamship to container ship in the 1970s is a big change. Jumbo jet was a big change. Now all this use fossil fuel, and fossil fuel is a depleting quantity. Today the price may be lower because the demand is down, but it is certain the price is going to go up, because ultimately the supply of fossil fuel is declining and the demand is rising. So, but when the price of fuel goes up, transportation will be more expensive, and that certainly would crimp the kind of globalization we have seen. The supply chain economy that has developed, where tiny parts are produced in many countries, they are shipped to one place to be assembled into a product. And so even the bluefin tuna fish, which is caught in the New England waters in the United States, are flown to Tokyo to be sliced by the sushi chefs, then they're flown back to New York to serve in the restaurants there. So if a fish has traveled 16, 20,000 miles before coming to your plate, and that is the kind of excesses that we have been performing because we have had cheap transportation, and that is going to end. So maybe next thing we'll know, the sushi chefs have been flown to New York to station there and chop their fish right in New York rather than fly them to Tokyo and bring them back.
How will this impact globalization? Will it not mean localization or immigration or some new way away from the traditional way that we look at globalization?
I think it is going to lead to more regionalization localization is impossible because no country can produce something entirely within its own border and make it at a price that people will buy. You can make T-shirt in the United States, it will cost $60. But if you take US textile cotton to China and make it there, it will be $5. So the question is that that kind of supply chain economy would perhaps become more regional so that the distances traveled by goods would be less. But division of labor, disintegrated production, distributed production is something that is economically so important to keep the price down. I don't see that this can change unless there is an absolute catastrophic decline in fossil fuel and shipping stops.
So just as an aside, so does this mean that West Asia, which has the oil reserves, could finally be the new global leader in terms of control of resources that drive globalization?
It will be a new global leader until the point alternative technology, alternative energy has been produced which knocks it out. Remember that until the discovery of petroleum in the 1830s, it was whale oil which was used to light homes, to provide illumination. Whale oil provide the fuel with which to cook. And so whales had a lease of life when petroleum was found in Philadelphia. So there may be another time when somebody comes out with a technology which produces solar cells at a dirt cheap price. So the solar cell technology would replace fossil fuel in a big way, and that would reduce the importance of Middle East.
One last set of questions, and this is on preaching religion, God. In my opinion, organized religion has failed society, and yet you have large group of people who are constantly preaching their little religions. In fact, there are 40,000 religions operating in the world today. Don't you see this as an anti-globalizing tendency rather than globalization, as you have mentioned in your book?
It has always been the case that attempt by one group to proselytize, to win over convert, has different kind of impact. Some has met tough resistance. Throughout history, missionaries have been executed by sovereigns. In Japan, 16 Jesuit missionaries executed. In Vietnam, there are hundreds of cases where missionaries were executed. There are other cases where missionaries succeeded in converting the natives they went to convert. What is happening is that the world's major Abrahamic religion, Islam and Christianity, they have a huge pool of resources, and so their drive to proselytize is meeting some resistance in local cultures. So it is the kind of action counteraction. It is inevitable that when people feel that their traditional culture is threatened by something coming from outside, they band together to resist. And so this threat from the outside is increasing because of the ease of transportation, communication, and wealth available to some of these groups. So this
is proselytizing therefore anti-globalization? Would you?
No, proselytization has been part of globalization, because if you think that these religions of the desert, Christianity and Islam, now we have 3 billion people in the world, they converted. How did it happen? This is the globalization of religion, but this is producing some resistance. Yeah.
Last question. What is the religion of tomorrow? Democracy, globalization, climate change, are these the new religions of tomorrow? Does God have a place?
I think the God that is going to have increasing place in people's concern is the environment, because when you cannot breathe, then you realize the importance of air, and until that happens, you go in a many ways. And there are places where you cannot breathe. And you said, "My God, what have you done?" So I think that awareness that we have a finite world and finite resources, air and water, and we are we are being very profligate in using those. And so I think increasingly environment is becoming the new sort of religion of people, and people are going to be converted to that because it is their life that is being threatened.
So we go back all the way 5,000 years ago when the religion was born with fire, water,
Yeah.
and the elements.
Right.
And after all this evolution, we come back to fire, water, air. Thank you
Yeah.
very much, Mr. Nayan Chanda. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you.